Hello everyone, welcome back to our COVID classes. Today we will be talking about the pathogenesis of infectious diseases. In this section we will cover some basic aspects, and in the subsequent section we will cover basic pathogenesis of bacterial, viral and protozoal diseases. Pathogenesis is the process by which an infection is initiated and that results in the production of a disease. It is not a random mechanism, but it is actually a very orchestrated event. It involves various evolutionary adaptations of both the pathogen as well as the host, and the process of pathogenesis is as a result of years of evolution. For a pathogenesis to happen, there is a chronological event of things that happens. Let us see what are those chronological events of pathogenesis. So first of all, the pathogen has to access the portal of entry. We have discussed about various portals of entry and routes of infections in our previous sessions. And once they access the portal of entry, they will encounter certain target cells and substances where they establish an initial colony or an initial beachhead of infection, from where it can launch full-blown assaults over the host. This can be the mucosa, the mucocutaneous junctions, or skin, epithelial surface of skin, etc. Then once they encounter and establish an initial beachhead of infection, they will colonize the various target cells and the substances on the surface and then spread locally. Slowly these organisms gain entry into the blood or lymphatics, or first into lymphatics then into blood, and from that point it will travel to, so this establishment of infection into the blood or mainly the lymph is called as a regional spread. So initially a localization, a colonization happens, then the infection happens or the colonization happens locally, then slowly they advance to the lymphatics, and the infection, a regional infection is set up, and from there the further movement to longer distances through blood or lymphatics happens, and that resulting in a systemic infection. And the systemic infection to happen, the movement inside the blood vessel or lymphatics can be as a cell free, or the organism may be freely moving, or it will be associated with any of the cells in the blood or lymphatics, and finally it will reach newer organs where they will find newer targets of infection. So that is the that is the basic chronology of infection, and it is not necessary that all these events happens. For example, for canine distemper, maybe all these events may be happening. The organism may be localizing in the mucous membrane, it will be invading the retropharyngeal lymph node and slowly spreading into the other systems and causing viremia, and finally ending up in the nervous system or other target organs. But some organisms or some infections, it will be limited locally only. For example, some skin infections or dermatophytosis, you will find the infection limited to skin, and there will be only local infections. So that is the chronology of infection. Then there is a defense mechanism of the host. Host has its own defense mechanism. How do these hosts contain these infections? So there is an evolutionary race between the pathogen and the host, and there are certain mechanisms by which these fightings happen from the host side. Many a times this is utilized by the pathogen to gain entry itself. So the first of the series is the barriers of infection. So barriers of infection can be structural and functional, and the structural barriers may include very large or macroscopic structures like our crania that encloses the brain, or the vertebral column that encloses our spinal cord. but it is not very important when it comes to infections. Rather we will talk about some microscopic barriers, such as the skin mucous membrane or the mucocutaneous junction, where they will form a very tight physical barrier so that none of the foreign organisms can enter in or penetrate these tight barriers. So however, if there is some injury or wound or penetrating wounds into these barriers, the infection can reach. Then there are functional barriers. So functional barriers can be physiological, such as the peristaltic movement in the intestine that regularly clears of whatever content is there in the intestinal mucosa, or the mucociliary clearing that happens from the lungs, from the conducting part of the respiratory tract like trachea, which pushes the particles away from the lungs to the external openings, or certain biological or chemicals like mucus, tear, lysozyme in the mucus, cerumen in the ear, etc., that can also help in pushing out to the organism, or entrapping and pushing out to the organism. But many a times what happens is that this entrapping mechanism itself is used by the pathogen to colonize and invade the epithelial cells. So those are the functional and physiological and chemical barriers present in the system. Then our body has its own innate immune response. Innate immune response, most primary is the inflammatory response that happens, and that will result following the presence of an organism. It will create an inflammatory response that will result in a reaction cascade that will either eliminate the organism or will continue until the adaptive immunity response and phagocytic cells are recruited into the site of infection. Then you have the mononuclear phagocytic system or macrophage monocyte system. So these are a system mechanism where you have the circulating monocytes and tissue dwelling macrophages, which will be scouting the surface of epithelium, or they will be associated with the mucosa looking out for pathogens, and once they find pathogens they will phagocytose it, and it is presented for immune response to happen, or to the adaptive immune response of the body. Again, the same mechanism that is used to capture, kill and present the information regarding the invading enemy is utilized by the enemy itself or the pathogen itself, where the organism or the pathogen allows itself to be phagocytosed by these macrophages, but it is not assimilated because they may have certain virulence factors that will prevent the phagocytosis and the lysis of the organism. And use this method, they enter into the WBC and travels to various associated lymphoid tissues and initiate infections. So that is the macrophage and monocyte system, or the mononuclear phagocytic system. Next is the phagosome lysosome mechanism, or phagosome lysosome fusion. Whenever a pathogen gains access into the cell, it is endocytosed and it forms a vesicle inside the cell. This is known as the phagosome. To lyse this content in the phagosome, the lysosome bags in the cell will come and join with the phagosome and fuse, resulting in formation of a single vesicle called as the phagosome lysosome complex, or the phagolysosome. Lysosome is released into the phagosome, the lysozyme is released into the phagosome, and the phagolysosome results, and the lysozyme will lyse the bacteria by releasing its hydrolytic enzymes and by releasing reactive oxygen species. So that is the defense mechanism. But pathogens with that undergoes this sort of infection, or that initiates infection by invading the cells, what they do is that they have virulence factors that can either bind, that can either inhibit the fusion of phagosome and lysosome, or it can even after fusion happens and lysosome is released, the lysozyme may be inactivated by the secretion of certain proteins by the virulence factors, or it will produce a large amount of antioxidants within the cell, so that lysozyme will not be able to act, and thereby survives the lysozyme attack. So that is phagosome lysosome fusion. Then you have dendritic cells. Dendritic cells are very highly motile cell that can be present everywhere, and it is a part of the reticuloendothelial system, and as you know, it is the antigen processing and presenting cells. So they will pick up the antigen, they will pick up the pathogen, lyse them, and produce antigens out of it, and these antigens are presented to the cells that are responsible for adaptive immune response, and thus the body gains immunity by recruiting phagocytic cells and other antibody producing cells or the plasma cells. But what happens is that certain pathogens use this dendritic cell itself for entry, and it will again the virulence factors are produced so that these cells are not processed, and when they go and present these pathogens, the pathogen will go and infect the newer target cells available in the lymphoid tissue. So that is the dendritic cells. Genetic resistance of animal, as we have discussed in our previous classes, it is very important when it comes to prevention of infection, and the defense mechanism, the genetic mechanism of defense system is controlled by many genes. It may include the genes that control the development and maintenance and survival of the epithelial cells, then the cells, the genetic factors that regulate the function of WBCs, that detect the pathogen associated recognition of pathogen associated molecular patterns, or the functioning of the pathogen recognition receptors or the toll-like receptors, and the class major histocompatibility complex, the diversity of MHCs that we have. So those are the genetic functions, and genetic defects like are associated with various infectious diseases like blood and all, where the immunity of the animal is genetically deficient, so that it becomes more prone to certain type of infections. Now let us come to the various portals of entry. So the systems involved as a portal of entry will depend upon the method by which the site is accessed. So if it is by ingestion, or if the pathogen enters through ingestion, usually the gastrointestinal tract will be affected. If it is aerosol or something, then the respiratory tract will be affected. Certain types of organism enter via coitus, and that will result in infection in the urogenital tract. Infections, certain infections are transmitted via contact or penetration by bite or insect bite. Then the initial site will be the skin, eye, or the ear, and the target cell can be located locally, regionally, or serially, and this local site is the place where the initial encounter happens, and the regional sites are from the organism when it moves from the regional from the initial site of infection to the lymphatics, then that is known as a regional spread. And once they colonize the lymphatic and spread through the blood or lymph to reach very distance organ, very far away situated organs, then it is called as a systemic spread, and thus they reach far away places. Then what enables these pathogens to reach the state of systemic or regional spread is establish an initial colony is the presence of virulence factors, and the functions of virulence factors are to colonize and invade the target cells, evade the defense barrier, suppress the immunity, and thus help in acquiring nutrition so that the animal or the pathogen can replicate. Now, what are the systems involved or what are the systems that function as a portal of entry? First one, as you know, it is the gastrointestinal tract. It is affected by usually by ingestion, and the target substance involved is mucus, and mucus acts as a very strong as a physiological barrier, but it is also a very good chemoattractant for certain pathogens. So pathogens may come and colonize in the mucus itself rather than going down to the epithelial cell surface. However, you should always remember that in the gastrointestinal tract there is no mucus in the on the surface of microfold cell. So microfold cell gives a very peculiar opportunity for the pathogens that can go down all the way up to the cecum or colon and start the infection. So M cells is a very peculiar thing in the gastrointestinal tract. Then from the mucus or through the M cells, the target of infection is always the mucosal associated lymphoid tissue, from where the further infections happen. Then you have the respiratory tract, and respiratory tract you have to get infected through respiration, of course, and there is a system of filtering the air that is being inhaled in the respiratory tract. Respiratory tract, and the efficiency of filtration depends upon the size, charge, and the shape of the particulate that is being inhaled. And the agents initially reach the nasal turbinates, where the wall-like pattern of the nasal turbinate and the pulling force from the lungs will result in the centrifugal force of air, and this centrifugation results in depositing most of the particles in the walls of the nasal turbinate. From there it will go to the cilia, trachea, and bronchi, where the pharynx it will go to the pharynx, trachea, and bronchi, where the conductive part, which is the conductive part of the respiratory tract, and there you have the mucociliary apparatus, which the cilia will be in constant motion. There will be a layer of mucus over that, and whatever material is being deposited on this conductive mechanism will be pushed out slowly. It will be pushed out to the anterior part and comes out through the nose. And cilia and mucosa is a very important defense mechanism when it comes to the respiratory tract, and that will help clearing out the infections or pathogens that are going into the lung. And if damage to the cilia happens because of the gravity and inclined nature of the respiratory tract, the infection can move retrograde or towards the lower respiratory tract, and that is usually the basis of bronchopneumonia, development of bronchopneumonia. Then when it comes to the urogenital tract, it is always by ascending of infection. It can be through coitus or trauma. Then again, skin, eye, or ear, it is by penetration or by direct contact. Direct contact infections happen in the dermis, whereas penetration is needed for infections to reach for initial colonization to happen in the deeper structures like the subcutis, associated muscles, extracellular matrix, connective tissues, etc. And this can be through wounds, abrasions, or bites of animals, or the bites of insects, as in case of vector-borne diseases. So those are the systems associated with the portals of entry. Then we have to consider the various target cells and substances associated with the initial colonization. So when it comes to the target cells and substances for initial colonization, it can be either the epithelial cells or the mucosal associated lymphoid tissue. However, to reach the mucosa associated lymphoid tissue, the mucosal or the associated barrier has to be penetrated. And epithelial cell can be the lining epithelium or the glandular epithelium or the covering epithelium present. What one particular case is of M cells in the GIT, where you don't find the mucus covering over the M cell. Why it does not have mucus is that it is the direct communication between the Peyer's patches and the exterior, so that the M cell can process or detect the potentially harmful agents outside the environment, and can be presented for stimulating the immune response. But this is used as a target. Anyways, then when it comes to the target substances, usually it is mucus, where you will find that mucus is a very strong chemoattractant for many of the pathogens, and it is used for some of the pathogens can use it for initial colonization. So initial colonization happens in the mucus rather than the associated epithelial cell surface, and then infection proceeds. So those are the portals of entry and how the target cells and substance act as portals of entry. Spread of an infection happens after the colonization of cell or after a barrier, a functional or a structural barrier is crossed by the organism. So when it comes to colonization, the organism may use mucus, as in case of certain spirochetes, then can colonize cilia. For example, in Mycoplasma hypopneumoniae, what happens is that the organism is inhaled into the respiratory system in pigs, and the organism will colonize only the ciliary part of the respiratory epithelium, and the cilia is colonized, and thereby it will kill off the cilia. Ciliary destruction happens, then the mucociliary clearing fails, and that will result in the spread of organism into the further respiratory tract. Sometimes certain organisms like Manemia hemolytica, they will colonize in the mucous membrane, and then they will produce certain toxins that will kill off the entire cell. Thus the ciliary function is lost, and the propulsion of the organisms away from the respiratory tract is inhibited, and thus an infection is initiated. So reduced function of mucociliary apparatus, as I told earlier, will prevent the pushing out of the organisms away from the respiratory tract, and that can result in infection flowing down to the lower tract and resulting in bronchopneumonia. Then colonization of the cell can also happen. For example, certain organisms colonize over the mucosal epithelium and then enter the mucosal epithelium via endocytosis. Once endocytosis happens, the organism is encapsulated in a vesicle called as the phagosome, and the organism or the agent will release certain virulence factors that will either neutralize the lysosome that is secreted into the phagosome after lysosome fuses with the phagosome to produce phagolysosome. So the lysozyme may be neutralized, or it will altogether prevent the fusion of phagosome and lysosome together to form phagolysosome. Then it will slowly go to the basal part of the cell, and then come out of the phagosome and remain in the cytoplasm and replicate. So that is another mechanism by which the colonization of the cell may happen. So when it comes to establishing an initial infection, it can be colonization or crossing of a barrier, and colonization usually happens using mucus the colonization of cilia or colonization of the epithelial cell itself. Instead of colonizing the epithelial cells, most of the pathogens use a strategy to penetrate the initial barrier of or the initial defense barrier, and they use one of the 5 mechanisms as we are going to see. One strategy is to form an endosome. The cell will undergo phagocytosis, allow itself to undergo, the pathogen will allow itself to undergo phagocytosis. The organism will enter through one side of the cell and leave through the other side. Now this mechanism seems to be very simple, but it will be different for different cases. Usually in almost all the epithelial cell there will be a covering of mucus, so the organism will have to, or the pathogen will have to first penetrate this mucus layer and then reach the cell, and then form a vesicle, phagocytic vesicle or endocytic vesicle to form a phagosome, and prevent lysis by inhibiting the formation of phagolysosome or inhibit the enzymes of lysis like lysozyme, and then move out to the basal region of the cell and come out. Now so the issue is with the mucus. So if the organism can penetrate through the mucus, it can enter through any of the cells like through the respiratory epithelium or the intestinal epithelium. But certain organisms like porcine circovirus use an alternative strategy which is more easier for them, because the M cells or the microfold cells in the intestine does not have this mucus covering, and these cells are in direct contact with the Peyer's patches. And what happens is that they reach, only problem is that they have to reach all the way down to the small intestine, find the microfold cell or reach up to the microfold cell, and once in microfold cell there won't be any mucus covering, so it can form this endocytic vesicle, get into the microfold cell and pass out into the pious patches and reach the regional lymphatics. So that is endosome formation. Porcine circovirus uses the M cell, whereas other organisms like Erysipelotrix ruseopathiae uses it will invade or penetrate through the epithelial cells in the mucosa. Then certain another mechanism is to not to invade the cell but sneak out to the other side of the mucous membrane through the or by traveling in between the space in between the cells or between the tight junctions. So the mucus has a mucous membrane, will have epithelial cell, and this epithelial cell will have tightly sealed border between two cells, and this is known as the tight junction. And highly motile organisms like Leptospira, how they enrich that they penetrate through these tight junctions because of their increased very rapid motility, use their property of motility, so they reach penetrate these junctions and spread in the extracellular matrix of the host, and then it will Leptospira will further penetrate the endothelia, reach circulation, and gets into the system. Another mechanism is the use of mucosal dendritic cells. So dendritic cells, as I already told, they are very motile and antigen processing and presenting cells, and they certain dendritic cells are associated with the mucous membrane also. What they do is that they will have one end in the surface of the mucous membrane, and the other end inside cells like or the pathogens like pox virus, goat pox and sheep pox viruses. They can they invade through the dendritic cells. So the dendritic cell will eat up the virus attached on its surface, but it is not assimilated or processed. The virus has its own mechanisms to survive, and this dendritic cell takes this virus to the regional lymphoid tissue owing to the motility of the dendritic cell. So trafficking through WBCs is another method by which these organisms penetrate the barriers of infection, and there will be certain cells, lymphocytes and macrophages associated with the mucus, and they will phagocytose whatever pathogens are deposited on the mucous membrane, so that it can be lysed and presented into the associated lymphoid tissue for initiating immune response. But however, the presence of virulence factors in certain bacteria will prevent the lysis from happening, and use these macrophages or lymphocytes as Trojan horses to reach the associated lymphoid tissue. The same happens in case of Rhodococcus equi. Then the last method is to traverse through the nerve endings present in the mucosa. The organism enter or invade the neuron through the nerve endings and is transported through the axons, and finally they reach the ganglia. Once they reach the ganglia, they can further ascend to the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system, and thereby causing dysfunction. Example is bovine herpes virus, which causes meningoencephalitis in bovines. So these are the mechanisms of crossing a barrier, and how the pathogens spread, establish an infection and spread along the system. So now we had a very basic preliminary or a bird's eye view of the various portals of entry and the mechanisms through which the organism can enter and invade and establish an infection. In the next session, we will try to have a overview regarding the pathogenesis of various bacterial, viral and protozoal diseases. Thank you.